South Asia should be happy to look at some of the numbers, the way the region has bounced back in the post-COVID period, and there are some countries in the region are going much faster than many countries in the world. Take, for instance, Bangladesh or India or Nepal or Pakistan. In fact, the many regions in the world are actually facing some kind of a recession. So to that extent, I think this region is growing much faster compared to other regions. And I think as Sachin pointed out yesterday, that I think recovery, the kind of robust recovery that we are seeing in the region will actually calls for reframing or reinvigorating our global value chains in the region. And if you look at some of the studies, if you look at a recent study by WTO, it says that one of the reasons why the region has not really enhanced these value chains within the region is because of, the cost. I think the trade cost that is actually very high compared to other regions. In fact, it says the transport cost in the overall trade cost is about 30%, and particularly for the landlocked countries, it's much more than 30%. And if you look at the regulations cost, it's about somewhere close to 16%. In fact, since yesterday we are talking about how the visa issues or motor vehicle issues or the customs issues that we are talking about. So all those things are actually leading to increase in the cost of trade for the sub-region. And that actually, in fact, what it was increased. I mean, it was much more than the labor advantage that we had in the region. I think the kind of labor cost advantage that this region had has actually been, overtaken by the cost of the trade and the regulation. I think that's something that really made this region limited, interaction with respect to global value chains. And so if you look at, again, the recent study by Asian Development Bank, there's a nice study by the ADB where it says that integrated approach to trade and transport facilitation. And if you look at that report, the large part of the report focuses on the South Asia. I think they think that there's a huge space for South Asia to enhance, the trade by increasing value chains as well as attract more foreign direct investment. And they talk about 4 suggestions. One is enhanced coordination between the countries, between the sectors. Right now, the discussion is more whether it's with respect to transport or with respect to customs, but there is no coordination between the two sectors. It's almost independently discussed in the literature. And they talk about unified policy approach, particularly when it comes to cross-country transport. They talk about inclusive and sustainability issues, because right now we're talking about gender-related issues, we're talking about climate change and sustainability. So whatever the new structure that we are talking about, it needs to be inclusive and sustainable so that it will have a large long-term impact on the region, so that it also can absorb shocks. I think the resilience to the shocks is something which is very important when we really look at the new systems of global value chains. And the last one is about the digital infrastructure. I think since yesterday, again, we are talking about digital infrastructure. I think South Asia has a huge advantage in terms of taking up this digital infrastructure and leapfrog in the global value chains compared to the pre-COVID situation. I think the post-COVID, we should be taking advantage of the digital infrastructure. In fact, UN ESCAPE also is supporting this whole, trade, where they talk about paperless trade. I think that is something one need to really look at when you want to improve the global value chains. So with this background, I'm sure the organizers already shared some of the questions for this panel. And we have a fantastic panel. I think this is one panel. In the previous panel, somebody said we should have a development wallas and the strategic or the defense wallas. Here we have panel where it's divided between business wallas as well as economists. So I think we have a very balanced panel here. We have 3 people from the business, and I think we have 3 from academic institutions. I don't want to introduce all of them. Right now, all of you have this biodata about all the speakers, and let me go one by one. And I'm told you'll have 6 to 7 minutes, okay? So first I will request Dr. Priyadarshi Das, who is currently Associate Professor at RIS. And I'm sure all of you know about the RIS. They have been doing great work in terms of regional trade and particularly on South Asia. And we have Sachin here and Prabir is also here from the institution. So he represents RIS in the panel. So over to you, Dash.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, colleagues. I think Chair mentioned very rightly in the beginning that reducing the cost of trading is a significant variable that we need to think about. I won't go into the details, but we'll try to present some of the trends that we observe globally as far as global value chains are concerned. Up to 2008, there was a rapid growth of value chains because there was technology enabling production fragmentation. The MNCs found the low-cost locations. China joined the WTO in 2001. So all this triggered a rapid growth of GBCs worldwide. And 2008 onwards, China itself and because of the US-China conflict, sort of domestic focus led to slow growth of GBC. But that does not mean that GBC integration is not happening. And what has happened, GBC in all different sectors have basically passed through three different phases. From commodity GBCs, from agriculture GBCs to limited manufacturing, then to advanced manufacturing and service GBCs. So now we are talking about a movement from limited manufacturing to advanced manufacturing and service GBC. And there are studies, in addition to what Chair mentioned, they see that services GBC
Hello. This is working.
Yeah. So be it Bangladesh, Cambodia, Laos, South Africa, you imagine the countries, Madagascar, there are various sectors who have apparel value chain, automotive, and all these have come. So what is now being observed is that for the developing countries to remain competitive in the GBC participation, as Chair was mentioning, the low-cost advantage is gradually fading away. Not only low wage, but also the material cost. So how do they remain connected to the GBC? So they need FDI for that. And that's what precisely is the objective of this session. How do they attract FDI? And FDI and GBC participation could reinforce each other. Like a first layer of GBC participation in the low assembly segment, there are studies that they accumulate capital, and that capital perhaps help the expand business and specialize in some segments, and then the subsequent level of FDI flows come. So both reinforce each other, but how does that happen? It requires several policy measures. Like FDI will flow where efficiency is there or higher productivity is there. There has been evidence that in recent years, the FDI is moving from efficiency seeking to resource seeking. At least in the East Asia and other parts, they are investing in more natural resources sectors. So if that is the case, how do the countries keep attracting FDI to their countries? That requires some sort of preparation for them. They can go for special economic zones, export processing zones. There is no evidence that whether that is the most effective means of going for that. They can leverage on investment promotion strategies and sort of keep attracting trade in agreements. Many of the FTAs and RTAs, they are participating. So there are studies which says that perhaps trade agreements could facilitate entry into GBCs. And there are, they cite the example of Bangladesh, Dominican Republic, Lesotho, Madagascar, Mauritius, Honduras, and others. And at the same time, there is a growing awareness about the resilience of GBCs. And this is post-COVID, that perhaps through the supply chains, we are inviting the risks of pandemics like COVID-19 and others. So how to sort of mitigate such type of concerns and allow the countries to stay connected in the GBCs. So the products need to be sort of satisfy the environmental standards. There has to be greater understanding among the countries about harmonization of standards, certification, all these, so that the trade cost does not arise because of other factors than the low wage itself. For example, trade facilitation, improving the digital infrastructure, all these are critical. But along with the digitalization, another risk has come. The advanced digital technologies are precisely labor-saving technologies. So labor-saving technologies like 3D printing, robotics, and automation, if they, for example, Bangladesh or any other South Asian country, if it is labor-saving, that does not really help, because the job creation, the developmental spillover of value chain will erode, and then that will not help, and it will go to some other places. Like the movement of the apple manufacturing from Costa Rica to Vietnam sort of created a vacuum in job creation in Costa Rica. So the low cost destination search for MNCs could lead to adverse developmental outcomes. I have a couple of more points. For example, if we, 3-4 points to mention. There is evidence that if we need FDI to sort of remain competitive and effectively take part in GBC, what is the current trend? FDI growth is actually happening when the firms move from the agriculture and commodity GBCs to limited manufacturing. That is happening more there, but not the case with the countries, those who are sort of experiencing limited manufacturing GBC to advanced and service GBC. So there is a catch here that the commodity GBC to manufacturing GBC, perhaps the technology needed is more there. Technology and innovation requirement is more there, that's why FDI is coming. So we need to think about that. And modern GBCs, those who are sort of led by innovator countries, that's the next level of countries, those who are on the high end of the design, product, and all these IP. So there is a requirement, greater recognition of IP and the intangible capital, how to make it part of the GBC integration. So what I essentially say that if South Asia needs to benefit from GBC integration, it has to think about how to keep attracting FDI to benefit from the best managerial practices, benefit from the latest technologies, and that will sort of prepare the domestic industry to catch up, and which needs the education system to be overhauled, basically focusing on R&D, technical education, so that the domestic human resources are prepared to go into services GBC. I'll end with that point, that services GBC could be quite promising for South Asia, because there are studies that a greater extent of servicification is happening in South Asia. I'll stop here.
Thank you, Das, for that very interesting intervention regarding what determines FDI and in this region, and what should be the focus of the region when it comes to attracting FDI. And you also talked about differentiated between the digital technology as well as the advanced digital technology. I think that it's not just limited to South Asia alone. I think the whole world is grappling with how that can be tackled. So let me go to the next speaker, Mr. Shamsa Mohammed. Yeah, you are from. Presently, he is honorary consul for Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, and I think he was a former president of Dhaka Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'm too loud. Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, everyone. So today, the question that we're dealing with is the value chains and FDI. So before we can talk about it, we have to first bring out the main issue. Like when we talk about South Asia, how do we define the region? Because we're talking about value chain, and value chain goes a long way. So we have to include Pakistan to the discussion. We have to include the rest of the members like Sri Lanka, Nepal, India, obviously there is, Bangladesh. So the main issue about FDI, when we talk about this thing, is one of the biggest barriers is for foreign investment is the regional policies, and especially countries. In the other session today, they were discussing about local nationalism, and the economic policies in some way are dictating these principles, and these things need to be addressed if we talk about the actual value chain, and we're missing out. It is unfortunate that we don't see the growth and the investment taking place in this region because of a lot of external factors. But one thing we have to take at face value is that the story of growth of everything, the economic success of this region, is written by the local investors in Pakistan, in India, in Bangladesh. So we have not been very dependent upon FDI for a long time. I mean, now it is taking place. There's a transfer of technology happening. Apple is setting up assembly plants in India. The chip manufacturing from Taiwan, for also political reasons, is shifting from Taiwan to India. In Bangladesh, 95% of the growth, the investment that has happened was done locally by local people. And so when we talk about FDI, that thing also gives us a protection, because as business people, we need to think, this growth will be sustainable if there is enabling policies beside this to help this region grow. For example, if we talk about Vietnam, Vietnam is just the complete opposite of Bangladesh. The main investment has taken place from foreigners. For say like South China tensions flare up, you will see the investors relocating to different countries like Myanmar and other countries. So it is not a sustainable model. So we have everything in place in this region, but unfortunately there's a disconnect. When we talk about when we see the political leadership, we see one sort of message, and when we see the people-to-people connection, we see there's a huge disconnect. For example, like just talking about FDI, how do we attract FDI? How do we give a value proposition? The CIS is a huge market in the world, and for us in Bangladesh, when I was the president of Dhaka Chamber, I had a proposal. I gave a proposal to the government of Bangladesh that we should explore the Gwadar economic corridor from Pakistan to the CIS countries, because it made sense. The way I just want to give one example, because I'm from the textile sector. That's my business, personal business. In the textile industry, I buy the yarn from Pakistan and from India. All my chemicals are, after COVID, from China, I've switched it to the Indian supply chain. So all my chemicals I'm buying from India as well. I'm doing the manufacturing in Bangladesh. Now to reach the CIS countries, if I just had direct shipping line with Karachi or Gwadar, I can just send it there, and by the economic corridor, it can go to the CIS countries. So it's creating value for all the countries in this region. But we can't do that, because we don't have direct shipping route with Pakistan. It has to go through Colombo, through transshipment. And with India also, after COVID, during SARC, it wasn't that effective. SAFTA also wasn't that effective. Now we're talking about SEPA. But after COVID, the relationship with India and Bangladesh, if you see the trade figures, it has gone up. Why? Because we actually reacted to the situation that created the disruption in the supply chain from China, and we switched to the Indian supply chain. And that created value. And when we talk about FDI, for example, like Reliance, I'm a big supplier for Reliance in India. My business with India before COVID was only 2% of my entire export. Now it's almost 25%. So I'm bringing in all the yarn and everything from India, I'm making it, and then I'm exporting to Reliance by trucking and everything. And so the wealth created remains in this region. It's not a pass-through wealth. When we talk about FDI, there's transfer of technology and everything. But then we have to take that into account, that wealth has to stay here. It cannot be passed through, because if it's passed through, then yes, you get employment, but at the at the expense of what? The small SMEs don't have a scope to grow. And when FDI, when the delegations, the business delegations are taken abroad, like when we go abroad, it's usually the big companies. But if you look into the bottom line, the economic relationship of this region has been written by the SMEs, the CSMEs of this region, from people-to-people connection. And we see a huge disconnect, especially when it comes to FDI. Like, we have so so many universities in India, in Pakistan, but there's no cooperation between us. There's hardly industrial academic relationship cross-border. It's not there in this region. It's not codified. It's happening, but it's sparsely. It's done on an ad hoc basis, but that cannot be. When you talk about the global value chain, how do we get the most out of it? I mean, in theory, we can say a lot of things, but reality is it's not possible, especially for this region. What is being done is done on a personal basis, on a business basis, that I'm approaching someone like that. And one of the things we will miss out in a big way is a new thing has come up, which is the net zero policy in the European Union. Now, for that, we need to invest in renewable energy. Bangladesh needs to invest heavily in renewable energy. And I think this is where, in the value chain proposition, there's a big opportunity for all of us, because there's a scarcity of land in Bangladesh. If we can do solar projects with equity investment from Bangladeshi entrepreneurs, or in Pakistan or any other country, to be net neutral for exporting later on after 2025 and especially 2030, these things needs to be addressed. So we need the policy from now. And just an example, like in India, there's so much land. In Pakistan, there's so much land. So if because of the scarcity of land in Bangladesh, I can approach a Pakistani company and be like, I will give equity. Like, there's 10 companies like mine who want to invest right now in solar projects. And we take the carbon vouchers from either India or Pakistani companies, and then we do the manufacturing in Bangladesh and we export. And if I have a foreign partner doing the investment, well done. Like, there's FDI, there's value chain creation, you're adding value to it, there is investment, cross-border investment taking place, and the exports keep on going. So I will just stop at that, and if there's any questions, we'll ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mahmood. I think you have brought in so many issues, the disconnect between the theory and reality, and you also brought the issue of the issue of SMEs. I think we should have a separate session on the whole South Asian SMEs itself. I mean, that should be the core of the global value chains or FDI. I think each country is grappling with how to really, take care of these SMEs, protecting them from the external shocks. I think that becomes a very, very important aspect. So thank you so much for bringing that issue to the discussion. So let me go to the third speaker now, Engineer Memon. I also request the participants to, panelists to focus on one of the other issues that's been specified. What are the lessons that we can learn from the success stories? I think particularly Southeast Asia, GVCs, and what we can learn from those success stories for our region is also very important.
And let me be a disciplined participant, because you have allocated 7 minutes, you see. So I should start watching my, okay. So you may not have to remind, but if I escape, you can always remind, because the rule number 1, chair is always right, you see. So having said so, let me start from the very basic principle in which we adhere to businessmen in Pakistan, because I represent Federation of Pakistan Chamber of Commerce, which is representing 80% of the private sector, business, trade, industry, and service sector. So we believe that with every day, with the emerging trend in which weaponry economics is now dominating as a tool for becoming political ally to get certain preferences, including FDI support from the countries from where the FDI is to come, you see. Not only that, but even they provide insurances and other reasons for those philosophies where you depart from the principal politics and you side with others, you see. That's why we personally believe that in Pakistan businessmen, the best recourse for us, which we look forward, is the more cooperation, I must say, within SAARC, you see. Once this a better cooperation is existing, it can also go beyond, because the way European Union manufactures, you will find only one capital good with at least 11 to 12 countries originating things which are assembled together, and it becomes the marketing tool, you see, which even India is using, Pakistan is using, so everybody is using. So how to do that? Probably that is the best economics in which we should look forward to have this, say, GCV, which is occurring. You see, the one advantage which we have in Pakistan, there have been so many research studies which say that working with your neighbors is costing you 27% less because of many advantages of logistics, understanding, common languages, and our, I must say, of course, never forgotten old relationship with Bangladesh, which was part of our country, and we still feel that we are brothers and we have a history. So we also identify those spirits, you see, in our mind and in our heart. Now, the problem is very simple, that economy in which Indian size is very big, Pakistan is also a considerable size, though Bangladesh size was bigger than us when we departed, but they have been able to control that size, you see. But still, you know, on the cumulative basis, it is a big size. But then how the investments should flow in, you see. Rightly, the Dhaka Chamber friend said that he tried to demarcate between domestic and, you see, from other countries. Now, as far as domestic investment are concerned, they have again, do have an advantage, but do not support the full advantage, because they are not technological driven. Because when the investment from outside come, they have a technological experience, support to really help in a productive capital formation. Because capital formation in any country is what it radiates to in eventual, what is called the increasing the competitive index of any country, you see. So having said so, let me just tell you a story in 30 seconds. I was in Cuba in G77. I remained active in that. So first time in 1999, I learned that the price of the knowledge of a Boeing during that time was 51%, and the price of the Airbus was 49%, price of the knowledge. So one can just imagine that if that is the cost of the knowledge, then if we just transform ourselves into integrated economies in South Asia, I mean, say in the SAARC becomes active, you know, probably I think this knowledge-based cost and affordability in terms of his cost to benefit ratio, because he is a manufacturer, Shams is manufacturer, I'm also manufacturer. We can imagine that how it, you know, translates per unit in cost of that. So we have another gain if that FDI within the region is flowing across. But then when it becomes a value added in GCV, it also adds to the outer side as the reasonable export when the economy of scale of production rises. One thing I tell you, in year 2000, when we were working on FDI with the United States Chamber, so they had prerequisites which have not changed up till now. Since a story is long, so I have only 7 minutes, already consumed 4 minutes. So these prerequisites contain few of the points which I must say that in any country, the domestic investment or even incoming investment is subservient to one major thing, the stable and time framework based investment policies. If I have my Bangladeshi friend, and if Indians are also liberalizing their trend of supporting the activated SAARC as a tool for the, you know, regional integration in economics, then I think probably that is the way it works. I should work, Bangladesh should work, you should work, all the countries in the SAARC should work. And not only work, but they should have a very much coherent, and I would say a same frequency-based policies. Agreed to in the SAARC itself that how this policy would contain the conveyance of the, hot money and repatriation and their protections and their interest-bearing accounts. And not only on that, but it should have also the state responsibility in addition to the origin to ensure that investment by all means under the sovereign guarantee. Number two, it was said, and it is said today also, predictable taxation policy. Now the problem is that in the SAFTA, I was working very closely in the SAFTA, that we have certain timetables under which, tariff structure is changing. Of course, on the non-tariff barriers, still we are a little far away from converging at a singular and the uniform policy. But I think that that also is a part of the framework in which at the platform of SAARC, this thing should also be sorted out so that all the countries have a fair competition based on just and fair play. And that also reposes, one can say, trust amongst. Then, apart from that, political stability, still the US Chamber believes that their, money from their investors should flow to a country which have better and stable, political framework. And another thing is that, which I personally believe that if you have a long-term sustainable, but then if you can recall in the WTO, it was very strange. I still believe that should be there. The transparency in public procurement, because certain projects, out of the business eventually land in the hands of the public. So there was a, demand in the WTO that transparency in procurement should be also one of the package deal, which countries like India did not agree, Pakistan did not agree, and so many developing economies did not agree for the reason that their political forces were not inclined to taking such a accountable measure. But I personally believe that on a platform which one should think that it's a society platform, now it is the time that business should become, at least I would not say cross the powers which are being enjoyed by the public sector, but at least should be equitable and should be so strong that the public sector should listen to it carefully and prudently. Having said so, I think what once again I will cater for is that reframing South Asia, then under that value chains and foreign direct investment. Now it is the time also to, instead of weeping on what is lost, we should look forward as these new trends in the world actually are cornering us and forcing us to be more, behaving better and friendlier and to each other in terms of this region, you see. That is my concern, because with these gradual, rise in the trends, if EU is working with United States, it has a one commonality, NATO is there. But I think we should come out of this, and then Pakistan has sometimes GSPs, sometimes GSPs are conditionals and all that. All these dilemmas are there, but then the dilemmas one cannot exclude because they are in a way with the powerful economies. So, but South Asia itself as a unit is a very powerful economy. The only spirit is that instead of always talking government will, I personally believe that it should be the will of the businessman, and the businessman and the strength of the civil society should be there in order to steer and compensate the loss which you have made. And I hope I still have time, or? Okay, thank you very much. So I think having said so, it is also empirically evidence. He's here, so many professors are here, I've been hearing them since yesterday, treasure of knowledge, that in any country, there is a one always emphasis laid, that increase the percentage of investment in terms of GDP, and wherever it has happened so, it really picks it up. Public sector creates like a public sector development programs. The private sector only invests here or from say India to Pakistan or Bangladesh to Pakistan or vice versa, only based on the contingency of the environment, which environment is conducive in terms of all the factors which affect a business in its positivity. So I think, thank you very much for giving me time, and also thank you very much for not asking me to stop.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Meman. I think you brought so many issues. You spoke like a pure industrialist. In fact, the many issues that you brought in actually reminds us that the World Bank study of ease of doing business. And I think if you want to really have that kind of connections within the South Asia, maybe we need to look at some kind of a study on the doing business in the South Asian region. Maybe one of the partnering institutions should take it up, so that, you know, there could be some kind of synergy between these countries when it comes to, you know, trading between the countries. So let me go to the next speaker, Dr. Biswas Gochan, Executive Director, Institute for Integrated Development Studies. We have communicated each other for many times, but this is the first time we are seeing in person. So over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Bhanumurthy. Actually, we met back in, I think, 2018 when I was in Delhi for a couple of years. And it was a pleasant surprise to meet you. And I didn't know that you are the one who are chairing this session. I'm particularly glad to have in this panel at least 3 members representing private sector, because I think this kind of discourse has to be, you know, led by track 2 constituencies. So private sector is very much there, and when we talk about value chain, when we talk about FDI, I think the private sector representation is pretty important. Let me start with, because, yeah, sorry. Because we are a landlocked country, we have very different sets of challenges, and we are overwhelmingly, you know, constrained by the lots of costs that goes into our transportations, infrastructures, you know, regulations, all those things. But having heard from our other members, especially Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, they have their own sets of other, because we always in Nepal, we think that had we ever had access to sea, then probably we'd have been in a different zone. But having heard our other members, you know, having that facility, still they are in a different sets of problems. So I think we share lots of those challenges as a member of South Asian bloc. And going back to the SAFTA, which came into operation in 2000, which has been the model for our entire yesterday and today's discussion in terms of reference point, because they are so much integrated. I think that's why they are one of the largest recipients of the FDIs. I think that's the thing that we have to realize. Unless we integrate, unless we work on our competitive advantage, unless we work with our own endowments, probably, you know, yes, there are countries like India and Bangladesh better place in terms of changing geopolitical, strategic, you know, situations. With China +1, I think probably India is going to be the largest beneficiary, because on the first phase, 90s, India happened to open up 1 decade later than China, and in that race, India completely lost that boss during that time. But now it's a time for India to catch up, probably. And on the manufacturing area also, I think India can do a lot better, and probably Bangladesh is also better positioned. But countries like us, Nepal, landlocked, overwhelmingly import dependent on India, we have lots of issues with India, and I'm very sorry again, Professor Sachin is here, who has been emphasizing that probably we have, consistently taking the name of India, but being a landlocked country by India, China, India is, of course, very much important for us. And most of our statistics, in general, for South Asia, corresponds with the size of our area. It's around less than 4%. So if you see most of our indicators, our percentage of global trade with the global trade, the size of GDP, mostly around 4%. But the only area where we excel is the remittance, around 28% of total remittance in the world actually coming to this region, and that has been a backbone for having some kind of external sector balances for us, for many countries, with the exception of Pakistan and Sri Lanka lately. So I think there are lots of comparative advantages within our region. Water resources, Nepal happens to be endowed, and also the limestone. In last 1 decade, we have become independent, in terms of cement requirement, and we have deposits that can, last for 180 years in that kind of very high quality limestones that we have. I think that's where probably India, Bangladesh can also tap that kind of endowed resources that we have. And tourism, I was very surprised to hear in the plenary session today that it takes for Bangladeshi citizens 4 months to take visas. We'd love to welcome Bangladeshis because they are the largest tourist in India. I think close to 2.6 million, and we have 100 times less than that's something Nepal is receiving from Bangladesh. And Bangladesh has all the potential to become one of the largest source of tourism for us. And I want to, in my college days, I happened to have a friend from Bangladesh. He was the son of a Bengali diplomat at the time. And what is narrated to me when he was flying from Dhaka to Kathmandu, and just within a few minutes, as he saw on the right side of the plane, the Mount Everest and all those, Himalayan region, he was thinking that this could be heaven. And I think that's something that we need to tap in terms of regional cooperations. And labor, we would also like to welcome Bangladesh for labor, because right now we're exclusively dependent on Indian migrant workers. And you'll be surprised, Nepal suffers twin deficits, not only a trade deficit, but also remittance deficit. So that together, but in Bangladesh it's just reverse, Bangladesh compensates trade deficit with the remittance surpluses. But in our case, we are facing this twin deficits, both on the remittance side as well as trade side. And trade is quite a huge deficit, $8.6 billion. Our economy of only $40 billion, we suffer trade deficit in India of 8.6 billion, which is just huge, not sustainable, and I think we need to work on that areas. And agriculture is another area, because we have this more than 1,800 kilometer of open border. Instead of making it a asset for both countries, I think to a large extent economically it has become a liability for a country like Nepal, because there's so much of dumping happening, and we cannot simply compete with Indian farmers because of the kind of subsidies that have been given to the farmers. Because in India, farmer issues is always a political issue, and Nepal, no one talks about farmers' rights. So there are lots of these issues, and unless we integrate better, for certain countries are very well placed, like India, as I said before, but for rest of the other countries, it's very difficult to be part of the global value chain that we are thinking. And that's where I stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bishwas. So I think you brought in so many issues for from the Nepal perspective, how to attract foreign investment, what are the constraints that state is and the country is facing. So can we go to next speaker, Ms. Huma Pakar? Yeah.
Thank you very much. With two of the private sector having spoken earlier than me, I think most of the, some of the things I wanted to say are covered. What I'd like to focus on is primarily regional integration, South Asian integration. And what I really feel is the optimism. I mean, I know the political agendas, I know it's been a long time and we're talking the same language, same reform, etc., but I'm very hopeful in the medium term. What makes me hopeful is I've come to SAES event after 10 years. The initial events, I must admit, the hope was not as much as I have it today. What makes me hopeful? Number one, when we used to meet 10 years back at these events, the only talk that we would focus on, the only talk that we would be focusing on was liberalization. We were running before we were walking. We never thought of regional connectivity as such. At that time, all we wanted was global liberalization, and we were running straight into it without learning, having to walk or crawl. What has changed today, what I see, is that sub-regional groupings within South Asia have started. This is a very positive sign, whether it is India, Bangladesh, or others. One does see that we have started the sub-regional groups which in time gradually will graduate into the region. So one positivity for me is that there is a start. And I see India, Bangladesh as one of the examples that is happening. The second thing that makes me very positive is the new global technological order. When we were meeting in the last 15 years, 10 years, technology was not where it is today. Artificial intelligence, algorithms were not where they are today. So giving an example, you walk in a city, you buy clothes, you go to the cinema, you buy a car, etc., etc. All that is owned by a company A or a gentleman A, the owner. Now, A as a company does not own any factory, does not have a warehouse, does not have a showroom, but A has a logarithm that is basically creating the supply chain for him. What does that mean? That means all the politics will eventually slowly have to fade away, and the algorithm will bring the best possible product put together for you. And supply chains will at some point in time, which for now it might look, it's the talk of the future, but it is not. The way things are progressing, some companies are already applying these technologies, and supply chain will become a product, a function of artificial intelligence. So that's another hope where I feel politics might be sidelined in some way or the other because of this technological world order. Another thing I feel 10, 15 years back, the hope was not so high because invariably you were a part of a bloc. You were either getting your agendas from Washington or Beijing or here or there, whatever. What I see nowadays is a very different credibility kind of agenda that is cropping up. There are many states who are becoming independent of any kind of bloc pressure. I see Australia, I see Saudi Arabia, I see even India speaking up for credibility rather than just being in the groupings. I think this will change things to a lot of extent, and this will also affect in the future that it is not bound by just political agendas, but yes, the credibility will involve two things. Geography, which is a priority because ASEAN has shown us the win-win comes from geography. And the number two thing that one sees is value systems. Your values will increasingly take us towards non-blocks and towards becoming favorable to what is credible rather than what is bloc-oriented. And I'm very positive that in the medium term, this would eventually be the game that will take forward. Lastly, when COVID happened, when SARS happened, say it's the China Plus that Dr. Biswas also mentioned. The China Plus factor has come in. When SARS happened, China was 4% of the global GDP. When COVID happened, China was 16% of the GDP. From Russia to Australia to UK, Nike had no shoes, iPhone was struggling for boxes, Australia had no wood, etc., etc., and the world realized that the factory of the world needs to expand beyond China. And that is when China Plus One came in as a theory. Sadly, as an ideology, countries from South Asia have not been able to become that plus one. It means China is there, but let's add one more destination as a forum shopping, which is steady and stable for us. South Asian countries have still not gotten there. Who got there was Vietnam, yes, geographical contiguity, but also because they are there as a region, as Professor Biswas said. It is not just one Vietnam. It is Vietnam, a region. And if we do not get together as a region, individually we'll be here and there, but we will not get that plus one status, which is stable and for long term. And I feel this is this is the factor, getting the region together, that is the difference between, say, if I compare my country, Pakistan, with Vietnam. Some 30, 40 years back, we were 40% GDP higher than Vietnam. Today, we are lower. And if there's anything, one particular area why we have not been able to get there, number one, regional integration. And number two, Vietnam got its FDI mostly for exports. If you are getting FDI only in FMCG sectors because of your demographic dividend, you are unlikely to become part of the global supply chains. In Pakistan's case, our FDI is mostly because of our demographic dividend, whether it is telcos, whether it is automotives, or the food sector. It is not there because had we gotten any kind of FDI into the system to lead us for exports, yes, that would have changed the shape of Pakistan, but we never got there. We never got there because as a region we were broken. We never got there because our own domestic issues did not allow that FDI. So I guess these factors are opportunities. These factors are where I feel things will start to move, irrespective of the things. You see, as business people, we compete directly with India in our rice, as I'm a rice exporter. But there's so many areas, no matter how many blockades are there, we do coordinate. We do have agendas where we are still doing businesses together. We're still discussing things and moving ahead. So on the ease of doing business, etc., I think that is a talk of the past. We'll be able to manage that. That is, once the political will is there, that takes a minute, a decision of a few hours to change things going. What needs is the ideological changes that, that is the key out there. There are other few things, but I understand because of time, I'll just have a few suggestions. So if in products and services we're not getting together, can we get together in climate, in green initiatives? So platform like these, if I would suggest, could we do some research study on getting together in green initiatives? At least that's beyond just business, and maybe that is something that CPD and others, or maybe RIS kind of agenda can be picked up. Secondly, most important, 100+ years back, the best thing about our region was its trade routes. All have been blocked, some are being revived. So from Ambala to Sialkot was probably one of the best food corridors, agriculture, commodities, etc. From Khyber Pakhtunkhwa to CIS states, there was one of the best trade routes, which was called two doors, Dodari, which meant Hindustan sent its food there and they sent its fabric and products. So maybe a kind of research, not historical analysis, but a feasibility research of just some basic trade routes of if we revive, what is the feasibility for such kind of things? And I understand you're stopping, but well, I'd like to end up on a positive note, and that's what I think we must invest in our region.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Uma, for bringing so many issues onto the table. And you also brought in the political will. I think that's still not on our table. So we don't think we can do much on that. But I think you brought in so many issues like the role of technology, the way the South Asian region lost out to Vietnam region. I think this should be by itself a case study for us to look at how the South Asian region lost to the Vietnam region. And then you brought in the cooperation in the climate-related issues. So I think all these things are very useful for going forward. So let me come to next speaker, Dr. Priyoranjan Singh from Manipal University, India. Manipur.
Mr. Chair, we started with an academic tone where the very concept of global value chains was technically defined. Then we came to the issue of why value chains are not developing in Southeast Asia. And a very important issue was flagged, that is, are FDIs or is local capital the better way out? Then we moved down to more pessimistic things like, but with hope that being neighbors, we should work together. I endorse that. And the condition for neighbors to work together, as Mr. Menon, you have pointed out, was there must be political stability and there must be convergence in thinking, in policies. And you put the best part of it that we should be friendlier. And I think that is more to do with India and Pakistan. We should be friendlier. Then we ended with a very positive note where Ms. Huma said, that we are moving forward. She has hope. But I would want her to extend her hope beyond climate change only. Let's have hope in the more real things about product and service exchanges and value chains. So I think after all this, my responsibility is to answer the fundamental question of why is value chains and economic integration not deepening in our region? What to do? What are the prospects? What is the way forward for us? Now, beyond the technical definition of global value chains, I would want, as an economist, to go into the more fundamental, structural roots of global value chains. We are thinking, we have a concept that as Southeast Asia, South Asia, we must think of producing on a regional basis, conceptually. Use our resources in a combined manner, isn't it? Produce regionally, that's the fundamental thing. Next, trade regionally. Let's start our production regionally. Let's start our production trade regionally. After having roots in our own region, South Asia, let us think of other blocks, like, for example, ASEAN, isn't it? So global value change is about getting together. We have to get friendlier, as you said. But regional value chains or global value chains needs long-term cooperation, not only long-term cooperation, but decisions that binds us all institutionally like ASEAN, isn't it? So we need long-term cooperation, which we are not having as a body. We lack in that. We made decision-making, but when SAARC breaks down, that mechanism is not there. Ultimately, what we need is a vision. But what are the institutions that we need, and what are the agencies that we need? SAARC is gone, really. We should not make SAARC go. We should nurture it. But in the short run, we talked about last day, the need of these, sub-regional or whatever it is. Now, so, why are we not growing? I believe that we don't have the agency to coordinate all these good hopes, number one. Number two, we have built infrastructures, especially India, huge building of infrastructures that has opened up India, that has built public goods, not only for Nepal, Bhutan, and Pakistan, and Bangladesh, in terms of infrastructures. Isn't it? Public goods, India is creating it. And in one of the most underdeveloped regions of the northeastern region, which Bangladesh has huge stakes, India has huge stakes in terms of its look east or act east policy. Huge investments have been made in transport corridors, multimodal corridors, Kaladan, trilateral highway. These are all public goods that probably India has made huge, not only regional, but also inter-regional connectivities. This is what we have been doing. Within India, there are various corridors which I don't need to mention. These are public goods India has created, directly and indirectly for the region in so many ways. So the thing is to turn these transport corridors into economic corridors. We have not been able to do that. So, for example, if this Kaladan project, isn't it, or east, these corridors all over India, have we been able to use these efficiently? For example, yesterday, our friends from Bangladesh were pointing out that, look, we build, economic corridors to Tripura, to Uttarakhand, or wherever, but on the other side of the border, you don't find the connectivity. Does India government lack, that will? And I raised the question, well, we have built LCSS at Mizoram, at Manipur. On the other side also, it is not there. These are situations where India plans for itself. The rest of South Asia, we have not been planning together. We create public goods, connectivities, but the failure of SAARC, the failure of communities, states to come together, think together, that is what I was telling of. We need concerted, policy institutions and regional guidelines like ASEAN, EU. That is why I had emphasized on not abandoning SAARC. But we are realists. Okay? So I shall not go into the deeper part of institutional building and integration, but there are certain, value chains already developing in spite of our incorporation, should we say, isn't it? And in fact, with cooperation in Bangladesh, look at textiles, look at cement, isn't it? Cement factories in Bangladesh survives on raw materials of rocks, everything from India, isn't it? Textiles, India and Bangladesh are having good value chains. And Bangladesh and northeastern India are two regions which are extremely underdeveloped, but there are chains, value chains, 1 minute. In terms of food processing, beyond textiles, in terms of so many other things. Value chains are developing. So now, spices, maps. These are the new things that are growing in northeastern India, and northeastern India needs investment. If Bangladesh does not have land, you know, at least things like spices and maps, you know, these are raw materials upon which you can add value here. So ladies and gentlemen, what I'm saying is that integration is necessary, but unless politically, if Pakistan and India, we do not come to understanding beyond our self-inflicted political enmity, you know, I think rest of the smaller states are not going to fall in. But Bangladesh is now working together for integration with India, and I do hope that whatever India has done in terms of connectivities, not only within the subcontinent, but beyond into the BCIM countries in Southeast Asia, these type of initiatives, which are concrete, which are public goods, you know. So friendliness means that we should reciprocate. And I think if Pakistan and India reciprocate, I think the world is up there for us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Singh, for bringing out the developments in the region in terms of the infrastructure and but how it failed as a regional group when it comes to connectivity between the countries. And you also brought in the institutional vacuum to ensure regional cooperation. So, but I think in the whole discussion, I still wanted to know what is the low-hanging fruit you take from these discussions, how we can really enhance this regional cooperation with all the constraints and limitations that we have. So I think we'll discuss that later. Let me come to the last speaker, Mr. Pereira. Bhuvaneka Pereira, yes.
Thank you, Dr. Bhanumurthy. I'll try to do justice for the time that has been allocated to me. Over the last half an hour or so, I have been listening to the speeches, the presentations given by this honorable lady and the other distinguished speakers, the 5 of them, at a very high intellectual level, conceptual level. I thought I will bring everybody down to ground level now in a different angle. Sorry for that statement. Catching up from the final statement, what Dr. Singh mentioned about reciprocation. So I had a different idea to present, but I thought I will make the continuity, and as the last man coming to bat, try to get a takeaway from this discussion and for implementation later on. As you know, we all deal with human beings. Though Fourth Industrial Revolution has come into play, still we are not dealing with robots. We are dealing with human beings, despite any political differences, any other differences that we have in this region. We see people speaking to each other in a very cordial, in a reciprocative manner. And how we can take this forward after looking at all those ingredients that are needed to make this GCF as well as the foreign direct investments the theoretical way. I think that's one basic thing that we need to put in. And that ingredient that I'm going to put into this recipe is to bring in a proper item, a dish to the table so that we can consume this in a satisfactory manner. Since we are dealing with people, I think there are 3 elements. First of all, the political leadership. The political leadership should have a proper vision, a genuine commitment, and a true belief on the positive of the overall benefits. We all know the leaders whom we get to govern us, they don't come from a parachute. We elect them. We get the people whom we vote for. But fortunately or unfortunately, sometimes it does not happen. But the first and most important thing is that the political will, political vision, political genuineness has to be there among all these countries. Second thing, we all discussed about These countries are operating in different economic environments, different political environments, different customs and rules and habits. So you have to synchronize them, you have to harmonize them, for which the basic thing is we need to have trade agreements. That's the starting point, that's the basic of it. But to do that, we need to have proper people. That selection of people is a vital ingredient to any country to have that. The leader of the trade team should be very carefully selected with knowledge, experience, who commands respect, and also who will have a flexible approach to deal in things, and also with a common sense of compromising. That person should not have the intention of trespassing into another person's interests, neither should he or she compromise on its own territory. So we need to come to a middle ground. And the objective should be that we need to come to a common solution. So for every country, whether it is a region, a sub-region, or anything like that, or even between two countries, the composition of that team who are going for negotiation has to be selected and carefully done. Then, the government is facilitating that. Government is establishing the team. Who is dealing with these countries? It is the private sector. Government is not doing business. Government is doing at a higher level. So the private sector, the valuable input from the private sector is very important. Whilst the government has its political and geopolitical objective, the private sector, like all these gentlemen that were speaking, that input is very valid. That should not be anything selfish, something unique to them, but it has to carry a common industry perspective. Right? They also should have the ability of working within a network, and also to understand the bigger picture of the country and also of the region. And they need to maintain a continuous dialogue. Now, to facilitate this, we need to have a mechanism. I believe there are two gentlemen here who have been associated or being associated with the Chamber of Commerce. I'm coming from a background of chamber, though I have been in the financial sector for a couple of decades. I moved out and I'm in a chamber. And a chamber is a vital ingredient and a component to facilitate this in any country. I believe the SAARC has a chamber of its own. With all due respect, I'm not too sure to what extent that chamber has facilitated to progress with this trade dialogue. The prime role of the chamber is to act as a conduit between the government at a high level and also with the private sector. They should be able to look at advocacy, both against some of the harsh rules that have been brought in, also to put across the message of the private sector to the government. They also need to have, they have a wide role. I believe you will agree with me what I'm saying. They need to have a close dialogue with all the foreign missions. They are not acting as alone. So it's another second level embassy to the country. They need to have a close dialogue with the foreign embassies. Also, this unit that we're talking of, the SAARC, whether it is continuing or not continuing is irrespective. Even though we do not put a title as a SAARC, we act as a community. A SAARC is just an identity, but we act as a community. Within this community, each country needs to appoint a national focal point as in terms of a chamber. Right. Those chambers will be dealing with the 5 or 6 countries that they're working. So I'm talking at the ground level. I'm not talking at the high level. And these collective chambers need to understand what's happening at the top. They deal with the missions. They deal with the business segment. And the business segment, when I'm talking, it is not the top companies. It will be the public quoted companies, large corporates, as well as the SMEs. They cut across everybody. Having said that, I will just tell you something which we could add up. If we go through this mechanism, we should be able to, this collective chamber, we could work with three pillars. The three pillars are policy advocacy, second is engagement, and third is market access. Since I'm running short of time, I'll just give a description of each of those. Policy advocacy involves actively representing the interests of chamber members in the political and regulatory landscape. Regulatory landscape means all 5 or 6 countries. Second, engagement. Active engagement strategies are vital for fostering a sense of community among member chambers and creating a dynamic business ecosystem. Third, market access initiatives are geared towards expanding global reach of chamber members. I think that foundation has to be laid for us to reach everything at the top. Thank you. And so also, Chairman, Chair, I think if we can move this initiative, I'm not forcing it, but just an idea, because all what we discuss has to have a work plan at the ground level. So if we can look at that constructively, I would really appreciate it.
I'm sure some rapporteurs are taking note of all the top comments that you have made. So we have come to the end of the panel presentations. We have 15 minutes time for open discussion, and let me come to that. So if you look at the note that has been circulated to all of us, there's a study by SDPI. It says that lack of functional economic corridors in the region, conflict zones brewing, mistrust between the neighbors, slow progress on trade facilitation and free trade agreements in the region, and non-tariff barriers that prevent skills and technology transfers are the key challenges. I think this still remain to be sorted out, and even after so much of discussion, I think one of the topics that didn't really come out in the panel presentation is the issue of skills. I think even within the countries, the skills are becoming a very important aspect. And I think as Professor Singh pointed out, even in India, I think the movement of people is restricted because of the differences in the skills. So I think the skills part is still missing in the overall discussion in the South Asian region. But I think mostly if you look at the panelists' presentation, I think we have still hopes on SAARC, I think as a South Asian, as a region, to really grow together and increase the cooperation between the countries. So let me open up for discussion. If you have any questions and comments, yes, please.
It is on? Okay. Okay.
Very brief, please.
Okay. Okay, my name is Ghafoor. I'm director of Abdul Munem Economic Zone Limited, and also former executive director to American Chamber of Commerce in Bangladesh. Very briefly, what is important is that I think it is the time to look, to find the visibility of successes of SAARC over the years. And the reason, because we are talking about refraining SAARC, so there are some reasons. I think it is important that we know that what are the success stories, 2, 3, and what are the challenges. This is number one. Number two, let me give one statistics, and it could bring a new dimension to this discussion. In the year 2022, the US, Bangladesh, both-way trade was $14 billion. The same year, the US and Vietnam both-way trade was $138 billion, number one. Number two, if you look at the FDI, Bangladesh receives about 2 to 3 billion FDI per year. Vietnam receives about $25 to $30 billion per year. So these are the things we need to think about and why this is happening. My thought is that there are a lot of opportunities, but what actions we are taking. I'm personally very much optimistic, but what is important for us to see that the relationship between people to people is excellent, private, but the problem is with the government-to-government relationships. We need to do something over there. And if that doesn't happen, I see a gloomy picture for SAARC. So my question to the panelist, how do you compare between ASEAN and between SAARC? And how do you compare the present situation of SAARC, and that is the objective SAARC had while it was founded? Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much. No, let's take Prabir. Yeah.
Congratulations to all the speakers. Just a quick observation is that India, if you look about GVC and FDI, Professor Priyadarshini's presentation talks about that it has to be free flow, and both are interrelated, and also with the trade. Now, if you look, Southeast Asia, 10 countries, they had no single incidents to impose FDI restrictions. But if you come to South Asia, FDI moving from in the region is not free flow, there are restrictions. Everybody has introduced at the border or the national level. I just, for the proceedings purpose, is that India introduced the restrictions for FDI coming inward, not on automatic route, restricted. Every FDI to be screened. So if you talk about such kind of a sub-regional or regional value chain, that has to be, gradually to be removed. Example comes here from the Japan, who are here, that even if you have restrictions, the G2G doesn't help. With the help of Japan, you can do sub-regional or even regional value chains. And there are cases here with the Japanese are investing in Bangladesh, and they are trying to link with the northeast part of India and several other parts to bring the food processing sector, horticulture, agriculture. Maybe some of them can highlight, if there is a way forward. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, Yuraj.
Thank you, Dr. Bhanumurthy. Nice to see you here. A couple of questions. This morning, my friend Swadim was talking about the whole ecosystem of collaboration, cooperation. I wonder if the ecosystem of FDI is right in place in the region, as I see that the region itself is not a capital surplus country, and we need to improve our macroeconomic reforms or several other impediments to investment if we are there to bring in more investment from outside the region. And then another question is, if that's the case, then how we can protect ourselves at the very turbulent time, because we have seen number of times when we had small shocks in the international financial market, our economies were crippling because of the heavy capital outflows. So this is one aspect, that if you are talking about intra-regional capital flows, we have to think how many of us have really gone for an enabling environment, like bilateral investment protection agreements, or avoiding double taxations, or also not delimiting the movement of some of the labor necessary for the whole value chain activities, and so on and so forth. And also maybe the use of digital technologies to better inform each other in the region. So I have a lot of questions on this topic, value chain and foreign direct investment, particularly on the enabling environment. Second, on the causal relation between value chain and FDI. Is value chain possibility drives the FDI or attracts FDI? Or FDI itself is a mechanism which promotes value chain within the region? So how does it flow from value chain to FDI, or from FDI to value chain, or are they simultaneously going activities? Would anybody in the panel respond to this question? Thank you.
Yeah, as we understand from the literature, I think there is a bidirectional causality between GVC and FDI. Yeah, so we'll come back to that. And I think on the capital account and current account, I think in our view, the shocks will be more into the current account rather than the capital account. So maybe we can discuss a little later. Yeah, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Mohammad Shoaib Chaudhry. I'm involved in the private business sector in Bangladesh, and I was the former vice president of Dhaka Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I think I am not qualified enough to make any comment on value chain of part of that. Rather, I'm telling some point on foreign direct investment. So FDI is very important for overall the economic growth of this region particularly. But this FDIs will not come automatically. Before any entrepreneur from foreign country, before taking decision, they will inquire about the status of that particular country in our region. From the existing business community, how they are feeling, what are the bottlenecks, particularly more precisely with the existing FDIs is concerned in the country. So as far as Bangladesh is concerned, I have some contacts with the existing FDIs. Most of the FDIs in Bangladesh is coming in the energy sector and some in communication sector. But it is very, very negligible in compared to total potentiality. So we need to improve that. And the main, the problem is that, they have a problem with the regulators, and their experience is not very good. So we must improve that. And I would like to cite another example from another regional bloc of Asia, that is, I'm talking about ASEAN. Look at their success story. And our SARC is also, it's not young baby anymore. It's a pretty long years been gone. So we must improve that in particular. And all of us should come up with an open mind. I'm just within 1 minute. Why I'm citing an example of that. I think India should take the lead because India is the largest country among this bloc. While I was the vice president of Dhaka Chamber, I got an invitation from NPO. This is an international organization called National Productivity Organization. It is based in Tokyo. So they fixed their annual conference that time in Islamabad, in Pakistan. So, and our Ministry of Industries, they nominate Dhaka Chamber to represent as a private business sector. And my then president, he nominated me to represent the business community of Bangladesh to that forum. Accordingly, I went to Pakistan. After coming back from Pakistan, about 2 months back, 2 months after, because of our family need, I and my wife are intending to go to India. And accordingly, we applied. And surprisingly, my wife got the visa, but I was denied. And prior to that, I got a call from Indian High, and it's not High Commission, it is an independent organization, IVAC or something called. I got a call from them. Then the first question was that, why you visited Pakistan? So I narrated my requirement, and even then this invitation was not from the Pakistan. It is from the NPO Tokyo. And more than 14 countries participated in that forum. So I explained everything, and I was very hopeful that I would get the visa because I've replied all the queries very successfully. But eventually I was denied. So we must, Pakistan, Bangladesh, these are, and many other countries, we're almost, my late father, I'm just, one more minute, because it's heartened me a lot. So that is the thing, we must broaden our mindset, and I hope from this forum, even today, if you look back the format of the visa application form in Bangladesh for Indian High Commission, there are clauses. Have you visited Pakistan within 2 years' time? And most heartening that,
I need to give time for the
have your paternal grandfather or maternal grandfather was residing in Pakistan? So this is very much embarrassing, this sort of issues for us. I'm thinking, sorry, I'm taking a long time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So, panelists 1 minute each. Yeah. Sir, we're running out of time now, please. Okay, one last
FDI,
question.
GBC linkage,
Dr.
as I
Dash,
mentioned.
one last question.
Oh, sorry, thank you.
just comments, like the 4 points you mentioned, the chair. I believe that digitalization will automatically take care of the policy coordinations of the more digital you get, the more this thing. Then the Excellency sitting beside you, the youngest Consul General that I have seen in the former this thing. What I would say, I was former chairman of EPZ, we call BEBZA, and the last speaker from Nepal, I believe, you talked about the chamber's role. I found that is very effective. Our marketing is a very effective, but if you do it from this, that is these things. And Ms. Huma Fakar, again, I would say that the youngest chairman that we have seen, she has given a very thought-provoking talk, and I would like to tell her that she talked about the communications and all these things. However, I started my career in the Silk Route, that is known as KKH now. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Dr. Dash.
I was just responding to the FDI GBC linkage. As I mentioned in the beginning, again from the literature only, that both are reinforcing. Now forget about GBC. Within the trade investment cooperation between two countries, investment has its own norms and other things. Regardless of whatever state of GBC, the investment flows. Now what is the catch here? In the GBC smile curve, the countries, those who are assembling, they would like to move up the value chain to a high-end, to manufacturing and subsequently like that. For example, assembling or in fact the textile industry also. If they need to go up in the upgrading in that value chain, if you do not have domestic savings or do not have enough of capital, FDI could bridge that gap. And along with that capital, it brings the technology. So what happens, there is interaction between the domestic workforce and the FDI. And that's what precisely happened when Korea was catching up with the industrial development. I can give you the examples that I found in World Bank report, that Vietnam, we are talking about so much of success of Vietnam, they are saying it's because of the multinational firms' presence in those countries, these countries could be able to succeed in exporting that much. They say that Samsung, had it not been there in the Vietnam, that much level of progress that they have done in smartphone export would not have happened. And the same example they are giving for Morocco, where France, Nissan company invested for automotive. Ghana, Singapore's company invested, that's why they are exporting cocoa beans. And the same is for Intel. Intel invested in Costa Rica and they could be able to export. So these are all mixed evidences as subject to empirical examination, but I found that in the literature. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mohammed? Yeah, let him go. Just 1 minute.
Sorry, thank you. I just wanted to add one thing. We are talking about SAARC, but in the last 5 years from private sector, I have not attended a single meeting regarding SAARC. It's always BIMSTEC. So we have to acknowledge the reality. In the regional, when we talk about the region, we're excluding Pakistan. So it's either BIMSTEC or it's SAARC. So we have to get that right, number one. Number two, my colleague, Dr. Singh, talked about the corridor, the multimodal corridor. Now, over there also, what did Bangladesh get by giving this transit to India? I mean, where has it added value for us? We need to question that too. And these sort of things, because on the flip side of this, the government of Bangladesh asked for re-export from to third countries by using the treaties we have with Bhutan and Nepal. So the trade can take place with China, cross-border. That was denied by India. So we need to see reciprocity done when these things are being done. Because otherwise we will just talk nice things, but on the ground, the reality is very different. And the other thing I wanted to emphasize on is we have to see, like we're talking about value chains, we're talking about trade like FDI. India itself is such a huge market. The domestic consumption is so big. In Bangladesh, I'm worried about exporting to the EU and USA. all my friends who have textile mills in India, I mean, they're not even bothered about exporting because the demand in the domestic market is so huge. So regional cooperation, regional integration, and India needs to be part of this, the master plan, because it's a very integral part of this region. And even us supplying to India for services and products, we don't need, I mean, FDI is always important, but the plan B is India. So we need, in the long run, closer cooperation and economic cooperation between Bangladesh, India, and this region as a whole. If we really want to make this succeed, we can sit here all day, talk about nice things, but we have to address the reality on the ground. Thank you.
I think very interesting question. The most difficult one was what he settled it, GVC, FDI, and vice versa. Yeah, see. Now, having said so, I think one question also came that about ASEAN versus SAARC performance, you see. I would like to say that yesterday also there was a discussion that from Maldives to onwards, 1997 travel, SAARC, FTA, you know, amongst the SAARC, it did not work, you see. Why it did not work? What I personally believe is that there are academia, professors, you are also professor, vice-chancellor. I'm saying the experts group of eminent people who had made suggestions, a very broad-band suggestion. In this year, this would be done. In this year, this would be removed. In this year, this would be established. But then there was no continuous, you can say, surveillance, monitoring, or implementable effective tool in that agreed position. And not only that, nobody pointed out after many years, people will just come and say, okay, it has failed, it is not performing, and let us look forward. Like today we are talking about reframing, you see. So there have been rhetorics I have been hearing. I am in trade politics for 25 years. And I have been going into all the plurilateral and multilateral agreement negotiations. But I've seen this is the only place where I have not found any tangible comparison, which academia, which is associated, of course, you see, and they should have brought, they should have warned, they should have guided, you say friendlier. There is a definition. I mean, under certain subjective conditions, you can always work the way in improving the competitive index of the country towards the prosperity. So I think the answer to that is that from now on, probably I will request you, your Vice-Chancellor also, there are professors and all that, they should always work on this issue. Compare where something is not moving, why, and where something has moved, why. This is the best guidance which we will get. And another thing, I think one Indian said so. Can I? Okay?
Yes. So done?
No, I've done another question I wanted to settle.
Quickly, sir, please.
Huh?
Quickly, please. Complete it.
Oh, okay, completely. In
10 seconds.
50 seconds?
10 seconds.
10 seconds, okay.
10 seconds gone.
Okay. Strange, you just put a condition of E is equal to MC square. Einstein, you see. So FDI does not move free in South Asia. I think one person from India, probably he said so. It's not so, I think. As far as Pakistan is concerned, we allow FDI to move in. We allow repatriation of capital. We allow repatriation of dividends. We allow, except one or two category in which in the morning, I mean, someone over there is sitting, he said, security wala. He said, there are some weaponry and other one or two things, religiously. And another thing is that he talked about Japan and all that. Maybe you are from Japan, huh? Okay, you are from Japan. That for Japanese there is no restriction. If you have a factory here, you can move your capital to Indian side or something like that, or you can integrate in the gross value chain. What I understood, but I think, yeah. But I think India also, what I have read about Indian investment policy, there are certain conditions, but not many, under which the state regulates and checks and allows. Very, say, limited conditions. So I think probably we should have dispelled the impression of young boy. He was not right, you see. Thank you.
Thank you.
In 1 minute I have to conclude. I think you mentioned about low-hanging fruits. I think clean energy. I think the market in this BBI and 4 countries that we have, I see at least 50,000 megawatt of clean energy. Bangladesh badly in need of clean energy. So that amounts to more than $12 billion worth of clean energy market within the region, and India is at the center to facilitate that. And these are the low-hanging fruits, something that we can do for the larger benefit of this region. And niceties are always there, but I think we have to hit the main problem to the core. And I'll just to give you an example. We have talked about this cooperation for more than 3 decades. In 2015, we had a very huge earthquake problem, and 2 days back, we also hit by another earthquake. Back in 2015, none of the South Asian countries contributed except for India, but India overpromised and contributed ultimately to only 0.5% of the pledged amount. So that's the kind, it shows, I think we really have to go beyond the niceties of these types of, conferences and sessions, and really, help each other at the times of this natural disaster. Thank you very much.
I think there was a question why ASEAN worked and why we have failed. I would say one biggest win in ASEAN was it was almost led by the private sector. The business advocacy in ASEAN was the best that you have even seen at NAFTA level. It was the business that, business is the soldier on the road who's going to fight the battle, and it was led by business. And the second thing, there was a lot of ownership in the ASEAN model. Ownership in the sense that Singapore, Thailand, Malaysia, they owned up. They became the hubs, and others were the spokes of the wheel, and it moved forward. In our case, as Shams has rightly pointed out, we do need India to become the hub. Back in the days, I would wonder, India does not have that development level in itself. The poverty levels were high, but now it does. Now it has reached that place where it can become the hub for SAFTA, and I think if that lead is there, things can move forward. Thank you.
Yeah, Professor Singh. Last one from me, please.
No. Okay, sorry. I shall share on the issue of SAARC versus ASEAN what she has said. You see, she was talking of, ma'am, she was talking of the material side of that ASEAN. But you also mentioned about the importance of values, remember that. So the very reason for the lasting of ASEAN is how it was born. It was born against an ideology, communism, number one, that binds them. Number two, they belong to the American bloc, okay, so that they had all the advantages of Western capital and support. But it's got to do with values. See that? ASEAN does not function on the basis of an office. It has what we call the ASEAN way, where things are settled, behind the tables, and when you reach a consensus, you decide, you succeed. So what we call the ASEAN way. So I believe that our own SAARC countries, South Asia, we have to find our own ways. See that? This is one. The second question, which about government-to-government failures, which I think you raised, I don't know. You see, the biggest problem for us in South Asia is that academics and businesses have played second fiddle throughout our history. But now that we are becoming economic powers, these are times when business and academia, which has been sidelined for quite some time, they need to come together. They are coming together. But business must lead and academics must guide them. Thank you.
Last speaker.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Chair. I just want to emphasize on the fact of why we need a very efficient and a capable negotiating team. All what we discussed at the high level, ultimately it boils down to negotiation. Last week we had the honor of receiving Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman, who is the Minister of Finance of India. And we also had the distinction of getting involved in the negotiations. And we had a critical issue for many long years. We were trying to negotiate with India to increase our quota of garments from 8 million up. It was no way. There was no way of cutting that boundary. We asked 12 million, no. So at this discussion, what we told them was 8 million garments is nothing. If somebody produces gloves, and when you send there, it's 6 million. We don't have an opportunity of sending our high-value garments. So can we have a quota category system? Then they said, how can we do this category system for each garment? Then we resuscitated a dead process what we had up to 2005, American quota category system. We said we'll implement that. We'll have a category for each garment. So with that, we establish a quota for each category. So problem was solved. That was because both sides were willing to meet each other and find a solution. A problem which was there for 6 years was solved within few minutes.
Thank you.
That's that.
Thank you very much. I think with that we are coming to the close to the panel discussion. I'm sure all of you will agree with me that we had a very wonderful discussion. Of course, we had some agreements and disagreements. And I think we also thought that in the whole regional cooperation, we think there are some winners and losers. But I think when it comes to the regional cooperation, I only know that there are only winners and winners. Maybe somebody is winning much more than the other. But then there is no regional cooperation. I only know that there are only losers and losers. So with that, let me close this session and thanks all of you for patient listening. And I think there are many issues have come up. I'm sure there are many issues for research also has come up. I think that we all need to, the partnering institutions should really take up all those issues going forward. In fact, there are a couple of things, as I said, which I felt which was missing. There are a lot of misconception about the whole data and statistics. I think somebody raised about the subsidies, somebody raised about investments. I think all those things need to be documented. I think the statistics, data, somehow this region doesn't focus much on statistics and data. Rather, we believe World Bank and IMF statistics, but I don't think we are really here to strengthen statistics and database within the region. And that's where I think the whole misconception keep coming between the countries. So statistics, skills issues, standardization of skill issues is another thing that needs to be coming up. And I'm sure the business people will agree with me that ESG is becoming an in thing right now. Now, where are we as a South Asian industry? How far we are addressing those ESG issues? I think the standardization issues becomes more important when you want to really have trade and investment relation between the countries. So with that, let me have a big hand to all the panelists for coming up with very good discussion, and thank you so much for all of you for the patience.
And thank you, Mr. Chair, for being so liberal.
So this is one thing we can do well. This is one thing we can do well in South Asian region.